Hello. On this Holy Thursday, we celebrate 3 anniversaries. The anniversary of the first Holy Mass, the anniversary of the institution of the ministerial priesthood in order to perpetuate the Holy Mass, and the anniversary of the promulgation of Jesus' new commandment of love. Love one another as I have loved you. On this very night, we remember how Jesus transformed the Jewish Passover into the New Testament Passover, into the Eucharistic celebration. That's what the Gospel of John today describes. First, he washed his apostles' feet, a tender reminder of his undying affection for them. And on Good Friday, he washes us again, but this time in the humble flow of his own blood. And then he commanded them to do the same for each other. That incident reminds us that our vocation is to take care of one another, as Jesus always takes care of us. And finally, Jesus gave his apostles his own body and blood under the appearances of bread and wine. Now, in our life, we want love to look nice and to feel good. And sometimes it does. Sometimes love is great. Sometimes it's a young couple standing in front of the altar, exchanging their wedding vows. Sometimes love looks like parents when they have been handed their newborn child for the first time. Sometimes love looks like the freshman who has for the first time fallen in love with a classmate. But then there are times when love looks like thousands of healthcare workers with surgical gowns, gloves, respiratory protection, eye protection, or a face shield. Sometimes love looks even like thousands of healthcare workers facing a looming shortage of personal protective equipment and still working on for their patients. Sometimes love looks like that. Sometimes love does not look nice. Sometimes love looks like hard and tough work. And I think that on this Holy Thursday, Jesus gives us an important lesson about what love sometimes really looks like. What was in the mind of Jesus at the Last Supper? He did not take divine knowledge to recognize that suffering and death were close at hand. Judas had already made up his mind to betray him. And the cross looms over this entire last meal with his disciples. In a few hours, Jesus would be in the garden, and there he would pray to his Father that the cup of his suffering would pass him by. But already at supper, Jesus could guess that the cup would not pass him by. His crucifixion was a reality he could not avoid. So it makes sense for us to picture Jesus at the Last Supper as keenly aware that suffering and death were moving towards him and that there was nothing he could do to stop them. So what does love look like when you are betrayed? What does love look like when you know you're going to die? On that first Holy Thursday, St. Paul tells us that love looks like Jesus taking bread and wine into his hands and say to people of every age, take this. This is my body given for you. Take this, drink it. This is the cup of the new covenant in my blood. What does love look like? It looks like a willingness to remain with us even in these outrageous circumstances of suffering, death, and anxiety. And that is exactly what we need in these corona times, but also exactly what we need in average times, where so many of us normally have an instinct to flee from everything that is difficult. It looks like Jesus is willing to give us the greatest sacrament of all, because he knew and he knows we will always need him. And apart from his consoling presence, he also gives us the ingredients of how love looks like when life is not bright and shiny. It looks like Jesus stripping off his cloak, kneeling on the floor and washing the feet of his disciples. It looks like the master doing the servant's work. It looks like the God of the universe willing to do the service, willing to serve weak humanity. Jesus said, "As I have done, so you should also do." And after Jesus shows us what his love looks like, Jesus throws down a Christian gauntlet that has echoed over 20 centuries of Christian experience. "I have given you a model to follow," Jesus says, "so that as I have done, so you must also do." That Last Supper is not just a thrilling tableau of what love looked like in the life of Jesus of Nazareth 2,000 years ago. The Last Supper is the mission statement for everyone who calls themselves Christians. So this Holy Thursday Gospel is not just a nice piece of history, it's an invitation to the mystery of your own life. And if you let it, this Gospel will ask compelling questions of you. What does love look like in your life? And what could love look like in your life if you let Christ teach you? What should love look like if you let Christ challenge you? What could love look like in your life? Could it look like patience or forgiveness or truth-telling? Could it look like a decision in your life to become more generous, more available, and more honest? Could it look like deeper prayer, a gentle tongue, an expansive heart? In the life of Jesus, love looks like a willingness to feed the hungers of the human heart through the Eucharist and through his everyday feeding of the hungry and helping of the poor. It looks like a willingness to stoop down low enough to serve. One advice: pay attention during these liturgies of Holy Week. The story of the Passion, Death, and Resurrection of Jesus is actually the greatest love story ever told. The Gospels will show you what love did look like and what love can look like in your life. Always love looks like Jesus. And sometimes love looks like us. And in this Holy Thursday liturgy, love looks like feet that are washed and bread and wine placed on an altar.